Good morning, class. This is American Literature 2130. This is the spring 2021 semester. It's January 29th. I'm Andrew Smith, and this is day 5 of a class with an overlapping theme of looking for America, which is, of course, a line from a Simon and Garfunkel song from the 60s, and also this idea that America itself is a mixtape. So America even itself is a collage. We're a collage of the 50 states plus the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, which should bring us to 52 states, maybe even in this administration. But who knows? I'm not a betting man. I don't bet on the stock market. I don't have anything to say about GameStop. Actually, I have a ton to say, but I won't because I don't know what I'm talking about. This is a literature course, and it's American literature, and America is our topic. And you see a map of America, and you know that America itself is a collage. We're a collage of those states, but we're also a collage of those regions. If you look at the top of the map, I'm from Michigan and Ohio and Illinois, the upper Midwest, and or maybe you think Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota is the upper Midwest, but I'm from the traditional Midwest of Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois. I'm a Detroit boy, so you see the Midwest there. And then look where we are. We're in the Southeast: Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida. Maybe throw a little bit of Arkansas, Kentucky, and Virginia, and maybe even some West Virginia up into this thing, maybe even Southern Ohio, and you've got yourself the South, the American South. So we are a haunted and gothic place, and we, in the collage that is these United States, we know what it means to be a Southerner, and I know what it is to be an adopted Southerner, a Yankabilly. I was told many years ago that's what I am, a Yankabilly. So sounds better than a carpetbagger for sure. You have the upper Northeast, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts. I got some folk up in Massachusetts these days, and then you have like the heartland. You have Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. We're talking to Joy Harjo this week. She was from Oklahoma. She's of Muskogee Creek, and her homeland now is Oklahoma. Though they had home folk in Alabama and Tennessee, and they were removed forcefully during the Trail of Tears. Texas is its own country, its own nation. Especially if you go to Austin, Texas, and Austin is the Nashville of Texas. It's the San Francisco of Texas. It's the music scene of University of Texas and Longhorns, and great culture and music scene down there in Austin, Texas. San Antonio, great restaurants, been there a few times. Houston, another fantastic place. Then you've got the West, and one of the novels I've taught in this class, that's a utopia that we do at the end of the semester, looks at that upper Northwest, Washington, Oregon. San Francisco to the north is its own country there. It was actually in the book we studied last semester. It was its own country called Ecotopia, but basically it's Portlandia, it's San Francisco, it's the hippie counterculture of the Northwest. So there you have it. As America is a collage, America is a mixtape. And so I'm going to encourage you all this semester to be song hunters. That's right. And I'm going to introduce you on next Wednesday in much more depth to a brother called Alan Lomax, who's since gone on. But Alan Lomax was one of America's, in the last century, one of America's foremost song hunters. And he went out looking for songs. I'm going to teach you about Alan Lomax and Harry Smith on next Wednesday. So in this collage of America, in this mixtape of America, I want you all to go hunting for sounds with me this semester. And this is going to factor in, of course, to your final exam. And there's no traditional final in this course. We don't sit and fill out a bubble sheet of multiple choice. We don't even have to sit and write an essay exam. Oh, how many times back in the day in my graduate school, did I have to go to the school bookstore and buy a blue book and sit and write a final exam? And oh, was it hard? And I'm not going to ask you to do that. You're not going to have to regurgitate random names of characters, page numbers, plot devices, and the like. Rather, you are going to become a producer of literature as well as a consumer of literature. And we're going to do that through this beautiful thing called the annotated playlist, the mixtape assignment. So I'm proposing here that America itself is this combination of things. You know, Woody Guthrie sang about this land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. And we have, in these regions, we have different styles of speaking. We have different accents. We have different foodways. We have different sports teams that we follow. I've been adopted into the SEC as a married into a Vols family, but of course, where I come from, it was Buckeyes and Wolverines and Spartans up there in Ohio and Michigan. So let me just give you a little bit of story, and I like to talk story, and you know, that annoying professor who you think you're going to get the facts that are going to be on the test, and the professor tells you their life story. Well, in literature, actually, being as I'm an author and you all are learning about the storytelling tradition in America, the storytelling that I give you is germane to the syllabus. It's completely on topic, and it's part of the discipline, right, of literature. So forgive me, indulge me. I've worked a lot of years to be where I'm able to be at this lectern, which is a desk in my home and a microphone and a good internet connection. Praise God for the good internet today. We had some internet problems the other day, kept cutting out on the lecture. So we're giving thanks today for good internet and for the internet service providers that's providing you and myself with an opportunity to do this class this way. Today, I subscribe to a digital music service that pays for the digital rights to stream a vast catalog. Now, of course, I'm always going to be interested on the songs that are not in that catalog, but this is a meaning not available on that service to which I subscribe. But you subscribe maybe to Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music. These are some of the providers of these vast catalogs. I'm a subscriber myself to the Spotify. I hope you all are familiar with the Spotify. I'm very much partial to its catalog. Now, of course, that's not enough money. The subscription is not enough money for those artists to make a living, but it's a great way for them to platform themselves. And so I also buy merchandise. I buy record albums, T-shirts, stickers, hats, posters, and the like to try to support the artists that have made my life so much more meaningful and enjoyable. But let's go back. Let's go back to 1985, 1986, 1987. I was a high school student in Michigan. I got my first radio show at WSHJ 88.3 at Southfield High. I'm still in independent, lo-fi DIY radio. I'm a DJ here at Tennessee Tech's 88.5 FM WTTU every Saturday at 11 a.m. I'm actually alternating Saturdays. Tomorrow I'll be doing a podcast. So I've been alternating podcasts with DJ sets, but what I'm teaching right now is actually informing my practice in the booth and also my practice on the podcast. So I'm studying this really full time for the love of it, and it's that love that really inspired people to make the original mixtapes and to share their music. So here we are, broke as a joke, college students. You can still get that subscription to Spotify for like the student discount, just a couple of dollars a month. Just a couple of Starbucks will buy you that subscription. Back in the day, we didn't have that. So where did people who were broke get their new music? They listened to the radio, but a lot of times commercial radio only played a very select style of music and a very select set of artists, and there was a lot of money and a lot of politics involved in what was on the radio and what wasn't on the radio. And if you didn't have a good college station or a high school station like the one I ended up working at, where did you find music? So we had these little homemade magazines that you could buy at the record store called fanzines, and we had independent radio, college radio, and high school radio. And those you had to be you didn't have the internet, so you had to be able, like today, I could go on a college radio station from anywhere in the country and get a good set. I've got a buddy who DJs in New York, who's also an author like myself about music. His name is Jesse. I could go and listen to one of Jesse. Probably it's archived on his website. I could probably go listen to one of Jesse's DJ sets, on demand right now. But then you had to be able to get it tuned in. So you had to figure out what was the radio in your community. Here it's WTTU Tech Radio, but if I was in Murfreesboro, I could listen to WMOT. Sure, Knoxville has got at least one good college station and probably another independent station in addition to the college station. But the thing that we had to do back in the day, if we wanted to get music, and I mean, I'm not going to tell you how many thousands you can get on my account. I have public playlists if you want to see, but how many thousands and thousands of these I've done, at least several hundred in the last several years. But if you didn't have music and you couldn't afford music because you're a broke high school or college student, you went to your friend's house and maybe they had a big music collection. And so this is the original social network. I went to Joe's house. We went down into the basement. Now, we did a few things that you shouldn't do before we're listening to music. That your brain has all of the chemicals it already needs. It took me a long time to figure that out, but we added a little bit, to enhance the experience. But don't do that. But I just got to be honest at all times. Tell the truth. It will set you free, right? So we would do that thing that would make us feel good, and then we would sit and listen to records for hours and hours and hours. And we probably had jobs, part-time jobs. We lived at our parents' house. We had part-time jobs, and we spent most of our money probably on records. Maybe even our part-time job was at the record store, and we would get a discount, an employee discount. And maybe while we were at the record store, there would be used records, and the boss would let you play anything that you wanted out of the used bin during your shift, so you could be exposed to more music. And then all the people who worked at the store, they were also listening to college radio and independent radio. And then MTV came out, and it had some good shows that were more on the independent side. And so people would come and they'd tell you what they were discovering. And then, like I said, the fanzines. And maybe if you worked at that record store, you would be getting a distributor, a small press distributor, who would be sending these independent music magazines to your store. They'd come, in boxes and zip tied bundles, and you would open them up. And you start reading the record review section at the back of those zines to find out what was coming out. Friday now is new release day. It used to be Tuesday. They switched it to Friday a few years ago. But like literally today, before I came on this call, I was looking into what new records came out today that I want to add to my list. I've already started my list of the best music for 2021. I'll be making mixtapes all year long. And then at the end of the year, I'll have like the big monster mixtape for the best of 21. The best of 20, especially after the pandemic started, musicians were still going into the studio and dropping new tracks right and left. It became really the way I saved my sanity in 2020, was just by listening to music. And I encourage you all, if you aren't already subscribed to one of these vast catalogs like Apple Music or Spotify, that you, or Amazon or YouTube Music, pick the one that you think is most compatible with your tastes and with your devices, and go for it. So we would go there and we'd sit and we'd have these things. So immediately the sharing of music is a gesture of friendship. The sharing of these new songs is a gesture of friendship. It is a way in which we communicate with people that we care about. Well, I was thinking about this, how to get you all exposed to how to do this and how exciting it is in a really quick way. Oh, I'll get to that in just a minute. Let me just go into this idea that the mixtape itself is a form of art. And I'm going to read you kind of a highbrow definition of what that means from a critic named Matthias. I think that's a European way to say Matthew. And Matthias Wegner, I'm not sure how I'm saying the last name correctly. Also, not sure the gender of the author. But this is in a book I have called The Mixtape, The Art of Cassette Culture. And it was put together by a musician. It's not showing up on the screen. Anyway, it's Thurston Moore was in a 80s and 90s band that I love called Sonic Youth. And he put this book together. There's several great books about the mixtape as a form of art. It's a very, and you can, buy T-shirts and get, little trinkets around the house that look like the old cassette. So the old mixtape way of sharing music, and this was usually a friend to a friend, right? So you had some new stuff that you were excited about and you wanted to give it to a friend. Also, the friend to friend aspect of it was oftentimes a way to meet somebody. So actually one of the most profound ways of mixtaping was boys and girls would give them to each other. A lot of times it was the boy giving the mixtape to the girl as a way to get into her universe, right? There's actually another one of these professional books about mixtapes that I own. Is the entire book is called A Cassette from My Ex, and every single mixtape in the book is described. An actual mixtape from the back in the day when this is the only way we communicated about music pre-streaming, was actual mixtape that the author got from an ex. And so they're telling their life story. They're confessing, hey, I don't date her anymore. It didn't work out right. There's a guy who's a professional writer named Rob Sheffield whose spouse died young, And so he's a widow, and he wrote an entire love letter to his deceased spouse as a way to cope with his grief and love around all the mixtapes that she and he made for each other. So this person says that the mixtape itself is a form of American folk art. Pre-digested cultural artifacts combined with homespun technology and magic markers turn the mixtape to a message in a bottle. I am no mere consumer of pop culture, it says, but also a producer of it. Mixtapes mark the moment of consumer culture in which listeners attain control over what they heard, in what order, and at what cost. It liberated us from music stores and radios in the same way radios and recordings liberated generations earlier from the need to be present at the performance of live music. The mixtape is a list of quotations, a poetic form, in fact, a poem made up of lines pulled from other poems. The new poet collects and remixes. Similarly, an operation of taste, it is also a cousin to the curious passion of the obsessive collector. Unable to express himself in a pure art, the collector finds himself in obsessive acquisition. Collecting is strangely hot and cold, passionate and calculating. All we can agree upon is that it's not the same thing as making art, or is it? A mixtape can never be perfect. My taste as a mixer tells you even more about me than my taste as a consumer already does. No mixtape is accidental. So check this out, class. I have this entire catalog of the internet at my fingertips. I've already subscribed to a few different of those platforms that I've already mentioned to you. Plus, there's all the free content that's already out there anyway. Plus, I work at a radio station. I can go up there and see all the new CDs that are coming in, being sent to the radio station by various independent labels. Why would I need a record collection? There's something magical and beautiful about the record collection. So I go then and I actually still acquire this music. And sometimes I don't listen to it on the vinyl. Maybe I just need to have the vinyl sitting there on the shelf. I need to spend every day that goes by, I say, I need to spend more time with these artifacts, these things, looking at the cover. Sometimes there'll be a story called liner notes written on the back of the record. Sometimes the records themselves will be anthologies and therefore mixtapes themselves. And I will literally sit and go back to my old roots, and I'll have the tape deck hooked up to the cassette deck hooked up to the turntable, and I will drop the platter on the turntable. I'll drop the needle on the groove and I'll have to line it up because there's maybe 5 tracks on side A, 5 tracks on side B. I'll find the exact groove. I'll drop the needle on the groove where I want to start. I'll hit record on the deck, and I'll start making an actual mixtape. And then you make artwork to go with it, and then you tell a story. You write out notes to yourself and to whoever you're going to give the mixtape to. So I'll continue to talk about this all through next week, and then I'll remind you again at the end of the semester. But that's what your final exam is for this class, is you're going to go be a song hunter. You're going to go and collect a story or a poem, if you will, of these interspersed lyrics and text, these found texts of these songs, and you're going to compile them together to be this own unique text. And students have been doing this for this class in some form or fashion for a long time now, and the results are always incredible. So we're going to be making our American mixtape. Well, I wanted to come up with a new way to get you excited about doing that. And so I thought about this absolutely amazing optional American assignment. It's still winter. The COVID numbers are still off the charts. We're still trying to spend time in our bubbles with our friends with whom we have regular contact. The rest of the people, we're keeping our 6 feet and our mask. It's going to be rainy and cold a lot and snowy even over the next few weeks. So this is a perfect time to cuddle up with some popcorn and a beverage of your choice and a good movie. And when I sat down yesterday morning and I thought of this, and then I asked everybody out in my socials to help me come up with this list, and ended up staying up late last night watching a few of these movies. But I came up with a list of some iconic American movies that themselves are mixtapes. Now, I give trigger warnings in this class. A trigger warning is not to say that there's anything wrong with the texts themselves. I'm not making a judgment for or against. I'm also not saying there's anything wrong with you if you have a predisposition to dislike certain kinds of text. I do want you to try to be open-minded. I want you to try to reserve, judgment to later, and try to allow a text to interact with you without you having to decide whether it's nice or mean, or whether it's going to heaven or hell, that kind of thing, right? So we're going to try to be super open-minded in this course. And some of the texts, though, are going to be difficult texts that involve, for example, drug use. And I mentioned that I don't use intoxicants, but that's because I tried them and I liked them a little bit too much for my own comfort zone. So I decided that it wasn't safe for me to use those anymore. So I exercise. I do yoga. I do drink a lot of coffee and eat a lot. So those things do alter my mind a little bit. And even staying up too late last night, that altered my mind. But I don't use the traditional things that people use to feel differently. But you might experience in some of the films and books we read this semester, drug use, sexuality, political views that maybe are different than your own, cuss words, violence. There might be some violence that's very graphic in some of these texts. So I'm just going to give you the blanket trigger warning. And again, this assignment with these movies is an optional assignment. I would still give the trigger warnings when I showed these movies in class, but we're not going to watch a movie over Google Meeting. I find that to be not an effective use of our time. We only have 50 minutes. And of course, I started class late because that's just how I roll. So we only have about 45, 50 minutes each time that we get together. So we're not going to sit and watch a film in class, but I regret that. That's something I miss, being on campus, having a really good projector with a big screen, not a little TV screen, but a big movie screen and a decent projector and a decent sound system on the teacher station to where we can turn out the lights, and watch a really good film together is a great experience. I used to do that in college. I had a professor, several professors that we would watch films. And I remember going to this one gigantic auditorium that seated like a couple hundred people that had a fantastic sound system, a fantastic professor, and a humongous screen. It was like being at the IMAX. This auditorium was so phenomenal for film studies every Friday morning. We'd be there all morning from like 8 till noon and watch movies and talk about movies. It was an incredible experience. And Professor Creekmer, I still sometimes talk to him on social media. Fantastic teacher of American film studies. So I'm going to encourage you to pick one of these movies. This is also going to lead to an extra credit assignment that could lavishly bump your grade. So I'm going to encourage you this weekend or within the next week during this assignment sequence before we start the Beat movement. Oh, there are some Beat movies, by the way, that you can also watch on Howl and on the road. But again, they also come with the trigger warnings. So Mixing America, movies with great mixtapes, movies that might be all about America. And the mixtapes are ultimately going to be dropping hints towards the soundtrack of your life. And so the filmmaker, in a sense, is writing the soundtrack to his or her life, or maybe to the character, one of the characters in the story. And one of the most famous movies as mixtapes is American Graffiti. That's actually where the graphic is taken from. Here, you may know this because it was the start of George Lucas's career. George Lucas would later go on to be more well-known for the Star Wars collection. Maybe you've seen, there's, I think, now 9 official Star Wars movies, and Lucas was involved in the first 6. So maybe you've gone and studied the George Lucas canon a little bit. But before he was introducing us to Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Princess Leia and Darth Vader and Yoda, he was teaching us about rock and roll and growing up. And it was a coming of age movie. It was a rock and roll movie. It was a movie that took place in a short window of time. It was a window that had multiple characters, multiple plots, and it has an incredible mixtape that goes with it. The image on this slide comes from that. So here's the extra credit assignment that I hope everybody will do anyway, just because they want to for fun, and then they'll just enjoy the points. And what you would do is you would write a blog about this after you did these things. Or you can just do these things and not write the blog and just have the awesome experience. Pick a movie. I'm going to give a list to suggest. watch that movie, find its playlist or soundtrack on your music streaming service of choice, and then listen to it. Make some notes on the feelings, images, and connections. And remember, that's the thing about the mixtape. It's a collage. It's a juxtaposition. It's these things bumping up against each other. So it's not just track one and what it sounds like and who it's by, but it's also track two, and it's how track one and track two interact with each other to make this new experience. Like you have driving down the road, listen to the radio, and the DJ plays a sequence of songs that really hits that sweet spot for you emotionally. Remember that the playlist is more than a collection of songs, but a collision course of sonic collage. The playlist is more than the parts put together, making that special something that sounds like life. I would dare say that sounds like America. And so now I've provided for you all this fantastic list, and I've picked out, it looks to me like I've picked out 12 films that are iconic films that also fit the bill here. American Graffiti by George Lucas, I mentioned. Almost Famous by Cameron Crowe came out 20 years ago, and it is about a young high school student who goes on tour with a rock band. One of my favorite films of all time. Highly recommend that. Perks of a Wallflower, I've used in this class many times before. It's about a high school student and his English teacher. So I think of you all as being the student and me being the teacher here. And the teacher is giving this kid books constantly to read books. You know, just here, I read this book, and he's basically done all the work that's required for the class. And so the teacher keeps giving him extra books to read. And then in the story, everybody in the story is making each other's mixtapes, and they're talking about the music that they're listening to. And the playlist that goes with that film is stunning. Now, and that's more recent. That's a 21st century text. Going way back, though, to the late 60s, Easy Rider is probably one of the most brilliant texts about the late 60s. And it's truly about America. You know, it begins with these guys on motorcycles, and it begins with the Steppenwolf song, Born to be Wild. It's an incredible, incredible film. Jack Nicholson, when he was really young, really great soundtrack. Forrest Gump might be the defining movie for this kind of playlist as story about America. I asked my friends on the socials yesterday to help me answer this question, and this was probably the number one film that people picked to fulfill this objective of a movie that is itself a mixtape, and then the mixtape that is itself a story of America. Silver Linings Playbook, much more recent film that really struck me deeply about that. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was the revival in what is now called Americana music, but traditional music, folk music, and country music, and music here of Appalachia. This is going to be a big topic when I talk to you next Wednesday about Alan Lomax and Harry Smith, two song hunters that I admire. But I'm also going to be talking to you on Monday about the blues and the gospel and how that relates to African-American music. There's not enough black film on this list. I forgive me for doing that. If you like soul music, funk music, R&B, and hip hop, there's not just enough on this particular list here. But Do the Right Thing is a classic Spike Lee movie from the 80s that would maybe hit that button nicely. Baby Driver is the one that I hadn't heard about, which really fits this because the main character is obsessed with his playlist, and he's got a bunch of iPods. Remember when everybody had an iPod before your phone became your music player? Everybody had an iPod. It was just amazing, or some other MP3 player. Baby Driver, newer film that really nails this topic really well. That's the one I stayed up too late watching last night. Fantastic. A couple of really kind of violent 90s films, but really have great playlists and also really kind of make fun of America, but also symbolize the great things about America. At the same time, it makes fun of some of the problems with America. Pulp Fiction and Natural Born Killers. And hey, it's the 90s are now 30 years ago. I went to college in the 90s. I graduated in the 80s from high school, and I should have gone to college in the 80s, but I dropped out and was a vagabond for a few years and a hobo, and just working jobby jobs as well to get money to be a hobo. And I kind of, checked back in 90. Fall of 90 is when I went back to college, and I had a great run at Wayne State University between 90 and 94. And Singles is that Matt Dillon movie about the 90s and the grunge scene in Seattle. So it makes me feel weird because, like, in the 80s when I was your age, 30 years ago would have been the 50s, you know, Bill Haley and Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry and stuff like that. And the 90s are 30 years ago to you all. So that just seems like a long time ago to most of you. So these are some suggested films for you all to do this wonderful project on, this test drive to get you thinking about America as a mixtape. And now, if you did all those things that have been suggested of you, pick a movie, watch a movie, make those notes, you turn those scribbles into an extra credit blog that you can post anytime. No due date, no word length. Points are gravy. They're icing on the cake towards your regular grade. So I really appreciate you all getting on the call this morning, and I'll stay on the call for a minute if anybody wants to ask